Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a slightly delayed, partly my fault, partly Google's hangout for our second of the Shared Endeavour Hangouts for 2016. Every time we log into Google, something seems to change, and today my camera doesn't work, so apologies, but you'll have to cope with the top of my head in the corner of a picture rather than actually me. But what we're going to talk about today is using newspapers to visualise your one-place study. Now, anybody who has come along to a Hangout or listened to a Hangout before will know that I have a couple of studies, but both of my main studies, rather than my daft one in Cornwall, both of my Devon ones are rather small. So I don't have a massive amount, but actually when I was preparing for the Hangout today and putting together a few sort of thoughts and slides and ideas and things, I actually came up with a lot of interesting stuff. So I think for the first time in a long time, I could actually say I've done something on my one-place study, so I'm quite excited. Although some of the findings weren't necessarily good, but I'll show you them as we go along. So I'll share my screen with you, and hopefully we'll be able to trot through the slides fairly seamlessly. As I say, apart from you won't be able to see me, but that's probably a blessing in my opinion. Anywho, so we're going to look at using newspapers to visualise your one-place study. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background in terms of kind of pinging back to what we talked about in January in our first Shared Endeavour Hangout, which was all about sort of photographs. Because as I said, my studies are very small places. The study itself is pretty small as well. But my study really started because of a photograph from when I'd actually gone down to my place. I think I've shown this slide previously in a society hangout. Many of you will know that I do a surname study as well as a place study, and Siliphant is my surname study name, which was my great-grandmother's name. And Siliphant, this particular Siliphant, Richard, has got absolutely not a lot, I don't think, to do with my particular line of Siliphants, but being a good surname studier, I collect everything, and I was amazed when I went down a very, very small cart track, I think is probably the best way of describing the road to Luffincott Church, to find this on the side of the tower. The tower was rebuilt in 1791 by Richard Siliphant, and that's sort of my connection. We talked, say, in January about taking photographs and things like that, and sort of going to the place and getting a bit more of an idea, which is practical for some people, not so much for Alex, our treasurer, who lives a long way away from her place, but I know that she's done a wing tour when she's been over to England. I have a rather famous family in Tetcott, which is the adjoining parish to Luffincott. I've got quite a famous family, the Arscott family. The Arscotts were generally from Holsworthy, and one particular line of the Arscott family owned the manor house and a lot of the land in Tetcott, and passed it down to the descendants. Although they're not Arscott anymore, it's been passed down to their sort of cousins and things, because the Arscott line sort of died out. I've also mentioned over the time that we've been talking as a society that I do have quite a few issues with archival material that unfortunately Tetcott, I don't think, were the brightest of parish clerks in some ways, and their records were not kept particularly brilliantly. This is actually the baptism record that's held at the Devon Heritage Centre, and that is the marriage record register that's held at Devon Heritage Centre, which is surprisingly enough unfit for production. The records that I do have access to are fantastic, and I'm going to link those from kind of the paper records that we will sort of collect, all the baptisms, marriages, burials, and those kind of things, to actually visualise some of the things that happen in my parish. And I've got an ideal parish clerk, who I talk about quite a lot, who records lots of other things, as well as just the name, the abode, the burial date, and the age of the person. So Richard Spry died suddenly by the bursting of a blood vessel, and an inquest was taken. This is way back when. I have plenty of these. I haven't noted the year on this particular one, unusually. But there are lots of different annotations. Sometimes you can see consumption, or brain fever, you know, same things that are obviously prevalent in the parish at the time. But he also puts other amazing bits and pieces in there, like this. Richard Carwithen, who hung himself in the hayloft over his stables. Now, I was looking at this as I put together the slides for today, as I say, and I looked through the Find My Past newspapers, and I looked through the British newspaper archive, and there's no mention that I could find. Obviously, the OCR might not quite have got Carwithen correctly, but there's certainly no obvious mention in a quick search that I did of Richard Carwithen. I'm sure there probably will be in some of the local records and so on, nor of John Colwell, who burnt to death in 1838. Two particularly sad things that you can get from the parish registers. Probably a bit more thorough search of the newspapers, specifically looking at the local papers, would probably bring me some more information. However, there is one that I did manage to find, a good link to the newspaper articles for Richard Hockin, which I don't know if you can see that particularly well on the screen, but it says underneath, willfully drowned in Lana Lake by his mother. 2 years old, and he was willfully drowned in Lana Lake by his mother, who was Eliza. So we've got quite a large article from 1862. I've got the reference on the bottom there from the Western Times. This is just the top of it, that talks about the willful murder of Richard Hockin, and goes into huge detail of the young lady who'd actually sorry, it wasn't Martha. It was Martha, not Eliza. It's about 3 or 4 columns with lots of people, the police, local people. And to cut a very long story short, because I couldn't possibly fit it on the slides, she had obviously had a liaison with a gentleman who had promised her marriage after having said child, and that didn't happen. And so she obviously, in a fit of stupidity, some may say, but certainly not being quite compos mentis, perhaps one might say, to be politically correct, she decided that she was going to drown Richard in the lake, and unfortunately succeeded. She was put into an asylum for some while and hopefully given some care, I would imagine. Lots of other things that you certainly wouldn't find in the parish registers, things that you might find more in comments in the parish chest kind of documents. Here we've got a particular article for the total destruction by fire of Tetcott House, which is the manor house. And there's actually 2 articles. The reference on the bottom is to another article that I'll put over the top in a moment. That we have the painful intelligence to communicate of the total destruction by fire of Tetcott House, the property of Sir William Molesworth, Baronet, that is. That's the family that the Arscotts passed on the sort of the land and so on, and the property in Tetcott to. The house, which was built about 7 years since, cost upwards of £9,000 in its erection, which of course in 1841 was a considerable sum of money. A report was spread ascribing the fire to be the work of an incendiary, but it has been ascertained to have been purely accidental, resulting from an accumulation of soot in the crack of a flue taking fire. Well, let that be a lesson to clean your soot out of your flues. But interestingly, I didn't find any reference to this locally. There didn't seem to be any obvious reference, again with the OCRs, to actually get the newspapers indexed. I couldn't find anything in the Western Times or anything local, but the Kendal Mercury and the Carlisle Journal also featured it, and numerous other newspapers as well. The burning of Tetcott House, this goes into a little bit more detail. It was situated near the village of Tetcott. The mansion, though not extensive, was fitted up in a most magnificent style with a splendid conservatory, gardens and shrubbery, blah, 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 blah. From the accounts, it appears that Sir William Molesworth was in London at the time the fire took place, and the mansion was in charge of his gardener and wife. Gosh, I bet that wasn't a great time to be looking after the house. Come back and there's not a lot left. And it says actually at the bottom there, you can see through the overheating of some of the flues. But really interesting, because actually I knew that Tetcott House had had a fire, but I didn't know very much about it. So just looking, as I say, to put a few the slides together for some discussion today was really useful. Other items that you wouldn't necessarily be looking up per se about your place study, but just putting in Tetcott and a small range of years in the British newspaper archive, I came up with a bankrupt. Mary Hutchins of Tetcott, Devonshire, a spinster linen draper, was bankrupt in 1810, and apparently that warranted newspapers in Chester to report it. Of all places, not exactly local, but another interesting thing, because how else would I know that? Maybe she might have been in the poor law records in some way, in the having disbursements from the poor law if she didn't have any money and had a family to care for, and maybe no husband or whatever. But otherwise, I probably wouldn't know. This one actually was an interesting one, because I found a gentleman here who died of Tetcott, Devon, July the 4th. Suddenly, Mr. James Sanders of Tetcott, Devon, a respectable yeoman, aged 60 years, in the barn with his sheep shearers, and fell backwards and died without a struggle. Well, I'm delighted to hear that, because he's not actually buried in Tetcott. So I don't know where he's buried, but at least now I can finish off his tree, and I know that, well, not his tree, but his particular information about him, because I've got his baptism and I've got his marriage, but I don't have a death for him. So now I know he died on the 4th of July, and probably I know more than I might have done even if I bought the death certificate. But I don't know where he's buried, but that's next mission. So another one, but that's a little bit closer to home, Taunton Courier and the Western Advertiser. At least that's still southwest. And I thought, Luffincott being a rather small place, I mean, as I mentioned, that church with the plaque on the side of the tower is right at the end of a very, very small cart track. And Luffincott has never had more than 50 residents, to my knowledge, from the research I've done. So finding any newspaper articles on Luffincott is pretty difficult. But I put in Luffincott and kept my fingers crossed and hoped. I knew there was one thing that would be in there, which I'll leave till last, but I actually found a rather unpleasant story. William, well, I'm going to pronounce it Madron. It probably wasn't French, but I'll go for a French pronunciation. 22, a young man of repulsive appearance, was charged with committing rape on a 9-year-old girl. I was horrified when I read this. It doesn't make very pleasant reading at all, actually. In 1848, she was actually made to explain in court whether she'd consented or not, at age 9. So I managed to draw out of the Kirsty archives of Luffincott's baptisms, her baptism at the bottom there. But I can't find anything else in the parish relating to her. So I wonder whether the family seemed to sort of still be around for a little while, but I wonder if they moved away. Again, it's a further research required, but I wonder if they moved away because of the shame of what had happened. But this gentleman, William Madron, was transported for life, which I think was probably his rightful end. Transported to life for life. He didn't seem to think that he'd done anything wrong, by the sounds of it, and they tried to actually just find him guilty of just an assault, which I'm kind of grateful for Mary's sake that actually they didn't just go for that. But the poor girl at 9 had to actually stand up in court and say that she hadn't consented to this 22-year-old man doing rather unpleasant things to her, bless her. Moving on to slightly more pleasant things. The fascinating legend of Luffincott. I've shown you my one postcard of Luffincott that I don't think I've ever confessed how much I actually spent on it. But the one postcard I have of Luffincott is a picture of Luffincott Rectory, which there are very few postcards of the rectory. And this is a newspaper article from 1911. The night before last, Luffincott Rectory near Holsworthy was burnt to the ground. The cause of the fire is unknown. The house had been unoccupied for many years and was in a very dilapidated state, and popularly supposed to be haunted. The ghost, in inverted commas, was alleged to be that of Mr. Parker, which is a Frank Parker, who was one of the former rectors of Luffincott, which, it was stated, appeared one night to a successor, who became so annoyed he left the house, abandoning his furniture. Parties spent nights in the deserted house, keeping fires going with chairs, tables and other household commodities for the purpose of laying the ghost if they could. The rectory stood in a gloomy dell in an isolated position and was practically demolished before the fire was even observed. So that was the one I was expecting to find. I certainly wasn't expecting the other one. But it just goes to show, I mean, my place is extremely small. As I say, Luffincott has never, to my knowledge, had more than 50 residents in it at any one time. In the censuses, 1841, 51, so on. Certainly, it has less than 50 people there now. So I was quite surprised, actually, at how many hits I did get just on the British Newspaper Archive and the Find My Past newspapers side of things, and there's quite a bit of crossover between the two. But yeah, even in small parishes, it's certainly possible to find some newspaper articles to really bring to life your parish, because I certainly have a very small connection, which has been born basically out of my surname study. But it's just looking for these slides. It's been really interesting, and sort of going through and going, oh yeah, actually I could look a bit more at that, and maybe even write an article for Destinations if Susie asks me nicely. But no, it's really, really interesting just going through, and I don't spend very much time on it, as I said at the beginning, but it's been really good just to kind of, I think the best way of putting it is twiddle about on the British Newspaper Archive. So that's it in terms of my sort of introduction and facilitation of the this hangout. So I don't know if anybody wants to ask any questions or make some comments on that and kind of throw us off into the next part of our hangout today. Don't all jump at once.
Well, I've used newspapers quite a bit, mainly for finding births, marriages and deaths. And I just wonder, has the British Newspaper Archive changed recently? Because they used to have a really good search facility. Now, for some reason, I can't seem to get perhaps it's just the advanced search I can't find. I can't seem to narrow down the things I'm looking for quite so well.
I don't know, Susie, because as I say, I've not used it a huge amount. I found the difficulty for my searches was putting this together. The issue I had was that the OCR just wasn't particularly great. It wasn't recognising words, or it was coming up with, when I was trying to look at the overview, it was coming up with crazy kind of things that I thought, well, that might say that, or maybe it doesn't. So I was having to really sort of second guess, and then I'm thinking, well, if the words I'm putting in are the ones that are jumbled up, then I'm not going to find them anyway. So I don't know whether they're maybe putting a huge amount on, and therefore the checks aren't being done so much. I'm not really sure.
See, the trouble I've got is because whenever I key in Devon, you can guess what I come up with.
Yes.
Something to do with Debenham and Peabody, as was.
Yeah.
So I always need to put in lots of qualifications, like Debenham, Suffolk, or various surnames as well. And the more bits and pieces you start adding in, the more unlikely it is that the roads are yours.
Yeah.
But I have done quite well, actually, on a lot of stuff.
I think it's greatly dependent on how large your study is, because I know your places, Susie, are much bigger than mine. So I'm not expecting a huge return. So the fact I can only find sort of 4 references to X, whatever X might be, it is not a surprise. So there may be more if I dig down a bit further, but I think it's probably just a question of spending more time on it, really. Yeah. Spending more time on it. But I'm grateful that there's more and more and more coming online, because of course I wouldn't be able to wade through manually all of the different newspapers to find these kind of things. I mean, again, I'm related to my one place study, but one of my great grandfathers was a prison warder at Dartmoor Prison, and anybody who knows much about Dartmoor Prison will know that there was a riot there in the 1930s. I think it's 1937, and the administration block was burnt down completely. So all the records of people who'd worked there, your staff records and all those kind of things, were completely lost. the prisoners' records, were held sort of more centrally, but certainly the staffing, a lot of that was lost. So I've managed to find references to my great-great-grandfather in newspapers where he stopped somebody from assaulting another officer or things like that. Otherwise, I would be completely clueless about his role within the prison, despite the fact he worked there for about 25, possibly even 30 years. So that helps me visualise my surname study as well, or even my family history. So yeah, it's for me, it's just been where the other records are just not there. The newspapers have been really, really useful.
So what's your main sources? Is it the British Library and the newspaper archive?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ones they're probably the only ones I've used. I've used some of the ones that Devon Heritage Centre, as it now is, that they have on sort of film and fiche. Years and years and years ago, I searched through those manually to try and find specific articles that I was hoping were in those particular newspapers to find reports of certain things. But certainly online, the main ones I use are British newspaper. Well, the main one I use is the British Newspaper Archive to find all the things that I'm interested in. But as I say, it's because mine's quite small, and my surname study, my place studies, they're not huge. Therefore, I don't have a great need to look further afield than that. I mean, I'm sure there are absolutely loads of different newspapers, like everything, isn't it? Mr. Google is your new best friend. But if you're looking for a particular newspaper, there are all sorts of separate ones, separate sites that have different collections and different things you can search. But it depends on your interest. If you've got a particular interest in a place, then you look for a place. If you've got a particular interest in a specific area of the country, then you'd look in that area. Some websites, I mean, the Times, I use the London Gazette, actually, saying I only use the British Newspaper Archive. I don't. I use the Times and the London Gazette for other things as well, but not so much for my place and my name study. That's sort of for other things, really. But the London Gazette's useful for things in terms of the any kind of MBEs, OBEs, New Year's honours lists, naughtiness, deed poll name changes. A lot of those back in the day, those are in there, but again, they don't really sort of feature in my place studies, so I don't really use it so much. But for other things, I do.
What about you, Ross? What do you use digital?
You're muted, my dear. Oh, not anymore. Oh, yes, you still are. Have you sat on it?
Am I still?
There we go. We're all right now.
Oh, right. I must have sat on it. I find it very difficult to search the newspaper archive because my place is Southpool.
Oh gosh.
And there are so many combinations of South and Pool and I get some really strange returns. I mean, have you got any brilliant ideas for how I search for Southpool and get the place Southpool?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I do. Because I tried putting in something I was looking for some while back, and I think I put in Reading or something, and it's like Reading or Reading or whatever like that. And I think if you use exact phrase and put it in inverted commas, then it will only pick out that exact thing as you've written it.
Right. Oh,
which may, I mean, you may find the South Pole of something. It's very difficult to specifically say that it's just a place, but you could also say South Pool and then Devon.
Yes.
But put them in inverted commas. I find that certainly helps.
And that works in Google as well.
Yeah,
so
it
if
does.
you the phrase in the Google search in inverted commas, then that makes it exact as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll work in deleting all the ones you don't want, but it certainly might lose some of them. Because with your surname study as well, that must cause you problems because it's it's close to other words. Both of them.
But it is, well, when I've tried searching on eBay, trying to search for Blagden, there is, I've actually had to put minus koi, minus pond, minus pool.
Oh no!
And let's see, Ottery is all right, but certainly when I try to search for South Pool on eBay, I have to be very careful because there's a South Pool in in Butlins in Skegness.
Oh god.
That, you know, they have a South Pool, and there's somewhere in Florida as well. You know, visit our South Pool, and you think, I don't want to. So yeah, so I have to do an awful lot of not this, not that, not this.
Well, that's the problem with place names that are, you know, that there are two different place names in two different countries. I searched for Newcastle, which obviously I was looking for, well, not obviously, but I was looking for the one in the United Kingdom, and it came up with the one in New South Wales, and I thought, actually, no. That's not the one I want. But thank you. That was just in Google. That wasn't in a newspaper. But yeah.
Actually, now you mention that, when I was starting my one place studies, I googled for Ipswich record office.
Yeah.
And I got the most magnificent website. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. It was so comprehensive. We've got links everywhere. Until I realised it was Ipswich in Australia.
Oh, no.
And I was quite disappointed when I found the one in the UK.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the difficulty for me when I'm looking through the newspapers is if I was looking for something specific, I would literally have to go, as you would expect, to the newspaper itself and trawl through. But I don't really have any kind of events. Well, actually, maybe I do, saying that out loud. I think, you know, I'd like to know how John Colwell burnt to death. No, I don't mean that in a funny way, but, you know, what happened to him? Clearly he burnt to death, but, you know, was it an accident? I mean, it doesn't say there was an inquest, but it doesn't say anything more. You know, how did that happen? And was there more to be found about Richard Carwithen, who was the one who hung himself in the hayloft? What was behind all of that? And there's absolutely loads of other things I could have put in there in terms of the extra bits that just build a bit more of a picture, because otherwise they're names and places, but they don't actually mean anything, the people. So it just sort of helps to bring it to life a bit more.
I have actually found that often the only way to get into something that happened in South Pool is to just zoom around and hopefully land on the sort of family names that were around, then go searching for the family names, because then, you know, you get all sorts of things in there, like who was bridesmaid and at a local wedding, and who won a swimming certificate in
and all this highly relevant stuff.
Yeah, but at least it's bringing it back down to your place.
Yes.
Is to search for the people and find the place sort
within
of
it.
Sideways.
But I think also, like I was mentioning about some of those articles being miles away from the Devon newspapers, if you fine-tune your search to the Devon newspapers, then you're less likely to get your Skegness, Butlins, Southpool. If it's a specific newspaper or a couple of newspapers in the locality, that might be
Yes.
a bit easier. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because no matter what your study is, there's always a problem like that. It brings up something that you don't want. Debenham, you know, that's got its own issues, and if I put in TechCot, it doesn't come up with a lot sometimes, but it's a spelling problem that I seem to have with that the OCR doesn't pick it up, or it's spelt wrongly. But then there's the TechCot hunt that comes up all the time, because there's a TechCot fox hunt, and that comes up all the time. So I have to do the -hunt if I don't want all of those to come up. I don't want to know where they were on that particular weekend. I'm more inclined to know, what's happened in the actual village, rather than who went out with which fox and how many there were. And but yes, it certainly makes for difficulty when you're doing things on. Well, it's good to have it online, but it certainly causes us difficulties when it's searching. I suppose we have to kind of offset the amount of time we would have taken to find those records if we'd have gone through manually, with the amount of time it takes us to fine-tune our searching to find it online. It's got to kind of take the rough with the smooth, haven't you? Got it online, but got to search a bit more carefully.
I'm also finding something that I'm going to have to research now is there a scythe pool in Cornwall as well as in Devon?
Oh, an interesting problem.
Because I thought there wasn't, and then eBay kept advertising key rings with saying, I come from Southpool, Cornwall.
No.
And I kept thinking, oh, come on. And there was no way to sort of get through to them and say, could you stop doing that, please? But then I'm looking up on, Google is your friend, Southpool, Cornwall, Britain's worst place to live.
Is that what you found?
Yeah.
That's what I just found as well. Yes. I just Googled it as well, and I thought, really? Okay. It's not exactly what you'd want to put up there, but...
I'm also looking at this, lovely blue sky and that sort of thing. Yes, I'm looking at that, and looking at it, Southpool is in Devon. It's not in Cornwall, it's in Devon, but they say it's in Cornwall. And I'm just thinking, well, how many sites have got this wrong?
Is it near the border? And have the borders changed?
It is very near the border, but at the same time, it's near the border with the sea.
And it hasn't suddenly turned into a sea parish.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, it just seems very strange. It's a bit like some of those family trees that are posted online, and if they're wrong, they just get copied and copied and copied and copied.
Indeed.
And so loads of people and places have got the same wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
The age-old problem, isn't it? When you search for a bunch of text and you sort of find it in about 6 different places, you search for the Poor Law Act of 1601 or something, you find exactly the same text in five different places, all wrong, potentially.
Yeah, with the same misspelling. So
yes.
That's how you can tell
exactly
that it's wrong.
Well, yes, and also possibly copied.
Yes.
And what was your source initially, I wonder?
Yeah, quite.
An interesting thing, actually. I was thinking about obviously I've put a couple of the newspaper archives shots in the slides there. And actually, they say that as long as you quote that it's from the British Newspaper Archive, you can put them, on in terms of presenting them. As long as you quote that that's where they're from, you can actually use them. So
good.
yeah, I was quite impressed with that. And the same is true in lots of places. As long as you quote where you got it from, they're not completely. You can't put them anywhere. I mean, if you were to try and pass them off as your own, obviously that'd be a bit different. Oh yes, I created this newspaper in 1834 or whatever. But but as long as you quote the source that you got it from the British Newspaper Archive, it's fine to produce on well, certainly on the ones I clicked on. So it's worth sort of checking. But yeah, so I was certainly it enthused me to find out a little bit more about some of those characters. Like
Yeah.
poor old Mary Wonnacott. I wonder what happened to poor old Mary.
Yeah, so even like a little obituary notice, not an obituary, but who turned up to the funeral.
Yes,
You
yes.
look at them and you think, oh, that's what her married name was then, was it? Ah, right.
The problem with that name is it's fairly prevalent in the Holsworthy environs. So even when you put into Free BMD or something, Mary Wonnacott and Holsworthy Registration District, there are a couple of options.
Yeah. Yeah, so in fact, I recognise that surname, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah, that is unfortunately the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, I've got her in 1851, but it's just putting her forward from there, really. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so my mother came from South Devon, so I know an awful lot of names from down round there because they were her friends. You know. Yeah. And I even know how to pronounce them if they're weird.
Yeah. Which is half the battle.
Yeah, it is.
Half the battle. No, I lose my Mary in 1851. That's the last census I've got her. So I think she must do something. I don't know what between 51 and 61, but I hope that she got over her childhood experiences, which so I didn't even know anything about them till a couple of days ago. So it just goes to show, though, the kind of things that are reported about your place in the newspaper. I mean, who would have thought that Mary Hutchins' bankruptcy would have been reported so far away?
Well, actually,
why would anyone in Chester care?
I'm really surprised that it's a woman who's gone bankrupt, because in that sort of time period, surely women didn't have the property to go bankrupt, do they?
Yeah.
Oh.
Don't know. Well, certainly she seemed to. I mean, whether she ran her own sort of business in linen drapery, or whatever, I don't know. But
unless she was a widow.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Again, more research required. So not only does it serve to visualise my place, it serves to reinvigorate my one place study. So I can continue looking.
Can I try and share my screen with you? I've not done this before.
So at least your camera's working today, Susie. I don't know what the hell's happened with mine, but right, okay, what have we got? Yes, we certainly can. Oh, missing in Singapore.
Yeah, this was given to me by one of my people in Devon, but he hasn't, which he'd kept as a cutting. He's in his late 70s now, so he was a child at the time.
Right. And what year is this from?
This will be World War II. Right. So mid 1940s, at a guess. But he doesn't know what newspaper it came from or the date.
Oh.
And the interesting thing is that Mr. and Mrs. Broom, their son Bertie Broom, did die.
Right.
I don't have a record of Jack Rose as being died.
As being died. Dead.
As being dead. Died.
As being died,
so I'm just wondering, either he was found, or he's on somebody else's war memorial.
Possibly.
So that's an interesting.
Or maybe he wasn't Jack. Maybe he was John.
No, I haven't got a Rose.
Oh, you haven't got a Rose at all. Okay.
No.
Gosh.
No. So that's leads me on to a little bit more interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what I've taken more than anything else out of the newspapers. It's just it raises more questions.
That's right. And interestingly, it tells me that where they worked, Mr. P. Elliot, builder at Bedfield.
Ah.
So I'll just drop that. So I thought that was quite interesting. But the
Yeah,
trouble is,
definitely.
when you inherit these cuttings from people, they very often don't recall date or which
No.
newspaper it was in.
What you might want to try, Susie, though, is I don't know how far the British Newspaper Archive goes up to. But if it does go that far, you could just try typing in some of the text. You know, literally like a couple of words in
Oh,
sequence, and you
yes,
might be
that's
able to. As I say, I have no idea if it would go up far enough or if it would have the relevant newspaper, the right kind of area. But you could just try that, or pop it into Google. Because somebody else may have transcribed it or have it on a site somewhere.
oh, that's a good idea. Yes, I'll try
Font full of useless ideas, and sometimes they actually come up trumps. You never know.
that.
full of ideas, and there's no guaranteed success on them.
Yes, thank you for that.
That's all right.
Well, I'm starting to achieve some success here after your suggestion of the
Oh,
putting
really?
things in quotes. Yes,
Oh, great.
I've searched for Southpool on the newspaper archives. Your search returned 16,805
Holy moly.
articles.
Wowzers.
Mm,
With Devon in
yes.
it, was that or not?
I haven't put Devon in there, but they're all Devon. In fact, they all look like my Southpool.
Oh, my
Wow.
goodness.
It's wonderful.
Wow.
That'll keep
Susie,
me fit.
why not try my idea? There might even be 2 ideas in one day. You never know. 2 decent ones. You never can tell.
I'm going to try that as soon as we come off it.
Well, do you want to know the good news? I've just found Mary Wanacott in 1861.
Oh, good. Oh, right.
So, yeah, I've managed to track her forward. They spelled her name wrong, but she's a 22-year-old dressmaker. I wonder what that means. Oh, no, that was laundress that they used to cover that with, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
You never know, though. We'll have
The
to see.
dressmaker just tended to be what pretty much every woman did.
Yes,
Didn't
exactly.
have any choice.
No. Well, no, I've managed to track her through, and her father's birthplace is rather interesting spelling of Holsworthy. It doesn't look anything like it.
Ah, right.
Never mind. At least I've managed to track her down another census. So she's definitely married after 61 or died after 61, whatever she did do. But,
Yes. I
certainly
wonder if she did get married.
yeah, that was my first thing I checked after I found that. It was, did she marry? Did she ever get over that experience or not?
Yes.
But certainly in the oh yeah, it must have been awful. But in the 61 census, they are living in, hang on a moment, Callington. So they clearly moved away from Luffincott. I mean, Callington is not next door either. Callington's Cornwall. But it's the other side of the A road now, which probably wasn't there then, but it's not exactly close. So I think they probably will have had to or decided to move away to kind of move away from the knowledge that everybody had. I would think it was probably fairly well known in the area. I don't think if it had gone to court, people would have kept that particularly quiet on the grapevine. So,
well, if it's a small place anyway, everybody knew.
Everyone knows everyone's business.
And they all knew and gossiped and talked and pointed and must have been horrible. So I'm sure they moved away pretty quick, really.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you found the family still there, they might have sent Mary to go and live with her auntie in Callington or something like that.
No, I mean, it's the whole family's there.
The whole family's there.
Well, parents and her, but yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, it just makes for interesting reading.
Yeah.
I think probably when I next go down to Devon Heritage Centre, I'll need to really consider what I need to do, because I know that not all of their newspapers are on the British Newspaper Archive. I know they've got other things, so it'll probably be a case of looking at what I know from either the burials that I sort of highlighted, that John Colwell and Richard Carwithen, and others as well. You know, those kind of ones, to think about what I want to find out and have actually a specific list of things I want. But I mean, some of mine have sort of said that so and so was the rector of the parish for N years, or you know, was the leader of the choir for for heaven alone knows how long, which I wouldn't even know if they hadn't written those in, because they're not the kind of things you'd get in a newspaper. It wouldn't sort of say, oh, you know, Samuel Cole has died in Tetcott and he was the leader of the choir for 20 years, because he probably wasn't even worthy of note in a newspaper. So yeah, I have to start my list of things to do on my next trip to Devon, I think.
Mind you, an ancestor of mine was reported in the paper because it was a report of a local fair. I'm trying to remember where it was, and because he had been in the employ of the same master for the longest amount of time, he got £1 for his
whole
award.
£1.
Which,
Goodness me.
I'll just try and find it again, but then £1 back then was something. It really was something. Because let's see, when did he get it? Right, he received his £1 in 1841. So actually, it was probably about £500, really, in today's money, which is nothing to sneeze at, you know. He'd been 38 years employed in the Ottery factory, 18 years during the time of the present respected proprietor, Mr. Newberry. And also, his death is in there as well, later on when he was 71. He was a trustworthy and faithful servant. Ah, that's nice. That's nice to know. So they do sometimes put in nice little things.
Yeah. How big is your place, Ros, in terms of a number of residents at a given point in time?
I haven't actually worked that out, but it's not very big at all.
No, I was thinking it was probably sort of fairly comparable to maybe my two parishes together, perhaps.
Maybe a little bit more,
Right.
but not. I mean, the nearest town was Kingsbridge, which in comparison is huge. So if that gives you any sort of an idea. Also, it's a little bit more difficult to work out because Southpool actually incorporates a couple of hamlets as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And are they separate parishes, or do they all sort of go to the same church?
They all go to the same church, but, well, I'm not sure. I mean, Frogmore and Northpool, I don't know quite what the situation is nowadays, or whether they're just sort of the odd farmhouse here and there. That's, further research required.
Yes. I think if nothing else, we've extended our research lists, haven't we? Here?
Yes. Our to-do lists.
Yes, which is already about a roll of wallpaper long.
Yeah. I must confess, I do tend to devote more of my time to my one name studies.
Yeah.
I don't know why, actually.
I don't think I do much on it either, frankly, because I do so much other stuff. But
yes, you're going to be doing some stuff this evening.
I am doing some stuff this evening, and I hope to goodness my camera works for that.
And I'm going to be watching. I've signed up, and I shared you on Twitter, and one of my followers shared you again. Yay. And that was to 3,000 people.
Oh,
so
lordy.
There may be a few people turning up tonight.
I think we've hit over the 2,000 mark on the registration, so I think you better turn up early if you actually want to be in the room, because you can only have 1,000 people listening live. So, I'm not worried at all.
Yeah, it's actually hangouts for that, Kirsty. Or
No,
do
it's
something
it's
else?
it's GoToWebinar that the legacy use, which is something that I have looked into with another hat on,
Right.
in terms of cost, because it is extremely expensive. But there are other options. I mean, Google Hangouts works, but obviously, I mean, Janet's had problems with her microphone. She's sort of hiding behind the one place I can't get a microphone to work. My camera doesn't work, even though there's actually nothing wrong with the computer at all. It's inbuilt in the computer. So, you know, all sorts of bits and pieces that sort of cause us a few problems. So maybe look at, other options, but it's the cost factor, isn't it? So that's the thing we need to sort of consider. But yeah, so I'll be blathering on not about newspapers tonight, but about rummaging in the parish chests.
Yes.
That's my that's my talk for later. So yeah, but no. So just sort of tying things up as we're kind of at the top of the hour nearly. I think we need to make our lists of to-dos, don't we, ladies? And,
Yes.
and listening, ladies and gents, as well. But I think the difficulty is the more you do, the more you find to do. Because
Yes.
having not done anything on my study for a long while, I've got a website. It's there. It's not really doing very much. I don't do a huge amount on it because I've got all the baptisms, marriages, burials. I've created trees and put censuses together, and I've catalogued all the buildings and things like that. A long time ago. I don't really actively do a huge amount, but actually just doing the bits I have done have really spurred me on. So I think it's dangerous. If you dip into the newspapers, you find these interesting things, and you want to be a nosy person and find out more. But that's good because I love doing my place study, and I am a nosy person about all these people, and I do want to build the bigger picture and things like that. And I mean, even when I was putting together the talk for tonight, actually, I put something in on Luffincott in the apprentice registers, and when I just showed you that front slide of the plaque on the wall, it says John Venner, and John Venner was the person that Elizabeth Ash was actually apprenticed to, and he's on the plaque on the wall.
Oh,
So it all starts connecting, and you suddenly realise that you actually know quite a lot about your place. So yeah, so sorry about all the technological bits and pieces and things today, but hope that sort of brought some bits to the fore. I would definitely look at British newspaper archives. It is a subscription, but even if you just do it for a month and try and pull out as much as you can. Find My Past, it's part of your subscription. The London Gazette's online, loads of other newspapers as well, so have a little Google through and see if you can find some interesting things to spur your interest in your places. So I think we'll sort of tie things up at 4 o'clock our time in England, and look forward to seeing people again on our next hangout. I know Susie sent out an email to everybody, so check your emails, and hopefully you'll be able to see when our next 2 hangouts are. I think in June we're going to be graced with a Ros presentation, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And Janet will be leading the one in May. So thanks very much for watching, and for joining me in the room, Susie and Ros as well, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thank you, Kirsty.
Bye.